Now, sadly, my team, in keeping with today's broader movement for liberal interventionism, doesn't know what democracy is. Because if they did, they would know that it is a spectacular contradiction in terms to argue that democracy can be delivered to a country or a people from outside. To claim that democracy can be given to people as if it were an already perfectly formed, perfectly wrapped gift for people to open and marvel over and be grateful for. Democracy can never be given to people because democracy is something that people themselves create through the very process of fighting for it. It is in the very struggle for democracy that people win their democratic rights. It is in the very struggle for freedom that people become free. You can no more give someone democracy or give someone liberty than you can give them a soul. These things can only be nurtured and won by people themselves. It is in the act of their being one that they become real, meaningful entities rather than mere platitudes. It is in the act of getting together and possibly arming themselves that people gain an awareness of their strength. It is through sharing their ambitions and ideals that they develop an idea of what their future society should look like. And it is through taking on their oppressors with force that they demonstrate their authority and their democratic legitimacy. And to see why democracy can never simply be handed to people, you only need to compare and contrast different historical examples of democratization. Now, in the wake of uprisings in which people themselves fought for their liberty, there would often be periods of great optimism and openness, periods of political and social experimentation. So when Barcelona was under Republican control in the Spanish Civil War, there was a dawning of a new kind of civility. There was a really powerful sense of self-determination. Following the 1956 Hungarian Revolution, before it was crushed by the Soviets, there arose new political networks and a sense of trust and belonging. For the first time in decades, people in Hungary left their front doors unlocked. But what happened after Iraq was supposedly liberated by external force? It fell apart. There was chaos, there was looting. And that is because Iraqis did not own their so-called liberation. They were not the subjects of a new democratic period. They were merely the objects of Western pity and favour. They were not actors in a new society. They were the mere spectators of the external overthrow of the Ba'athist regime. No new society was created. Instead, an old one was simply destroyed. History shows us again and again that only people's revolution delivers any kind of democracy worth its name, because democracy is nothing more and nothing less than the product of a people's own yearning for more control over their lives. And then turning to the other team. The first thing you need to bear in mind about the other team is that these are not happy, clappy pacifists who have a principled objection to foreign interference in another state's affairs. I apologize for getting personal, but in his book about Washington, Mr. Mayer says that the Falklands War of 1982, during that time, there was no time for nuance, he said. He says he had a one-word response to Margaret Thatcher's sinking of the Belgrano, which killed 323 Argentinians, and that one-word response was, great.
Yeah.
So, please, if you're voting for this team because you think they're pacifists, rethink. Mr. Tisdall was foreign correspondent and foreign leader writer for The Guardian and/or The Observer in exactly the period when almost single-handedly The Guardian invented the idea of humanitarian imperialism. He was foreign writer at a time when The Guardian was demanding the bombing of Yugoslavia and cheering Tony Blair's so-called Chicago Doctrine, the idea that a sovereign state's rights can be overridden in the name of human rights. If any Argentinian or Serb gets ideas above their stations, these guys will be the first to demand that they be punished. Hell hath no fury like a liberal annoyed. The opponents...
It wasn't me, madam.
The opponents in this kind of debate will often say that Western military force to deliver democracy is wrong. But they will say, as we've heard from Mr. Tisdall tonight, that it is legitimate to ask the international community to interfere in other states' affairs under the guise of humanitarianism. They don't like George Bush-style wars for democracy. They prefer humanitarian interventions when necessary. Well, I argue that this humanitarianism is, if anything, worse than what my team has unfortunately proposed. It is, if anything, even more allergic to the ideals of democracy and more damaging to foreign people's prospects for liberty than anything George Bush wanted to do. Because humanitarianism is based on the fundamental idea that foreign people are weak, that they are victims, that they need the patronage and the assistance of the international community. And in that sense, humanitarianism is the polar opposite of humanism. Because humanitarianism emphasizes people's weakness and their need to be saved. It rehabilitates, in politically correct language, the white man's burden. Humanism emphasized people's ability to understand and control their own affairs. Humanitarianism says that we are unable to do this and we need external assistance. Humanitarianism has created a situation where some opposition groups around the world now spend more time trying to win the pity of the international community than they do trying to create their own democracies. That is the logic of the humanitarian era, which we have heard discussed already. In the old world that was organized around the ideals of sovereign equality, third world peoples demonstrated their respectability by fighting for independence. In the new world, which is organized around the Chicago Doctrine and the Guardian's much-loved UN-led humanitarianism, third world peoples win favor by advertising their victimhood, by displaying their wounds, by saying, "We are suffering a genocide, please come and save us." The humanitarian era favored by these guys effectively demands that people morally subjugate themselves before the international community, which absolutely defeats the possibility that they could ever self-determine their lives and create a meaningful democracy. What we have in these two teams, ladies and gentlemen, is a perfect snapshot of where repressed peoples find themselves today. They find themselves caught between warriors for democracy who want to bomb them and more liberal-sounding activists who want to pity them and occasionally bomb them. And yet, if we look at recent events in Tunisia, we can see that foreign peoples need neither the assistance nor the charity of bleeding heart liberals over here. The Tunisian masses achieved more in 5 days than could be achieved in 100 years by an army of Amnesty International letter writers. They swept aside their government, they forced the release of 2,000 political prisoners, and they secured the unbanning of all political parties. They have shown that liberty and democracy can be spread by force, to contradict the lady who spoke up there. It can be spread by force, by people's own use of force. To finish, if you are thinking of supporting my team, if you are thinking of supporting this motion on the basis that Western force, Western military force, should be used to spread democracy, then please don't. Because you are wrong. And I don't want your votes. No, thanks. But if you believe that people are capable of liberating themselves and creating a democratic society for themselves, and that they should do so by any means necessary, however much it offends these guys and however much it offends those guys, then please support this motion and support the use of force to create democracy.